This is the AVID Site Data walkthrough for secondary with information and updates for the 25-26 school year. The purpose and objective of this walkthrough is really to help you both describe and understand the AVID implementation on your campus or in your district. It's not about compliance. It's not about a checklist. It's about identifying where you currently are on your implementation journey and then using that information to set goals and monitor your impact. And ultimately, data and certification together can help you define your return on investment. And I hope as you go through the walkthrough that I can highlight a few different areas where you might want to focus your eyes as you consider sharing the impact AVID is making on your campus or in your district with key stakeholders. The other more important purpose, I guess, or the objective is that we want to make sure that your site data is complete by February 6th. That February 6th due date is a firm one. In the past, it may have been a soft date. It's a firm one this year and will impact your certification. And we want to make sure that you have the tools and resources you need, as well as a good understanding of what you need to do in order to meet that February 6th deadline. As we do this, I want to make sure that you are aware that this is not an individual process or it's not the site coordinator's sole responsibility to have data completed. This is really a part of the site team. From the principal on down, the site team plays a crucial role in making sure that that data that you submit is accurate and timely, as well as comprehensive, that it fully reflects the current level of implementation on campus. And that data and certification together can help AVID Center staff, implementation strategists in particular, analyze the program's impact, as well as help identify areas for potential improvement and provide targeted support for your school or district. And when we take it in its totality, it helps us identify trends and themes that are in a geographic area, so we can figure out how we might most effectively and efficiently support for that common need. A couple of best practices that we want you to be thinking about with that firm February 6th deadline. We need to be thinking backwards map. So what do we need to do today so that we're ready to submit on February 6th? So we want to backwards map that to early December. We want you to utilize the tools and resources that you have at your disposal to streamline this work to make it effective and efficient. I'm going to walk through one of the AVID tools, or maybe two of them, that we have available to support you. But more importantly, what resources does the district have that you can utilize to help gather that information? And if your district does not currently flag AVID elective students in their student information system, I would highly recommend that you do that, because it's going to help make data collection on an annual basis much more efficient. And lastly, as I mentioned at the outset, this is not an individual's job, so we need to figure out how to divide and conquer some of this work, and how are we going to collaborate and communicate our progress regularly so we can hit that February 6th deadline. This certification timeline comes out every fall. And you can see that site data and certification opened in October. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to look at those resources, particularly the secondary implementation tool and those changes. Hopefully you've done a quick peek, if not a deep dive into that by now. But the window's open in October, and you can see that February 6th deadline, and then it needs to come back to the district director who submits site data by May and certification data by early June. And then you can see the timelines for senior data, and we will create walkthroughs talking about certification and senior data as well. Depending on your role, you may have access to a dashboard that looks like this when you click on certification and data. You can see now that the 4 components of data are reflected on this one dashboard. So in this particular instance, it's a single high school in a district. So you can see that they haven't started their site data yet. I'm sorry, it's not a high school, it's a middle school, I apologize. So they haven't started their site data yet. They do not have seniors, so they will not complete senior data. And then they have started the AVID elective certification. They've completed it actually, but have not started the school-wide recognition component. So it's just nice to see where you are in that process, to see how where it's at, if it's stuck with the district director, if it's with AVID Center, and ultimately when it's been verified. But ultimately, when you click on site data, secondary site data, you're going to get a page that looks like this, and this is very familiar back from years. If you've been doing site data, you can click on add, edit, or view current data, and that will take you to the web interface for data submission. I don't have access to be able to walk through a site's data, so we're going to use the data form, and you can see that as a resource on the bottom of the page. It's circled there. Those data forms lay out what each question is so that you can gather the information or divide and conquer, as I already mentioned. And you can see that there's also information about senior data on this page as well. It's the same location that senior data would be collected. And that process is a little different because it focuses on AVID elective teachers and students. And so how do we create space to get that information? And I will be working on a walkthrough related to senior data later in the next few weeks. But I'm going to focus on those data forms now. And so when we look at page 1 of the data form, it's basic demographic information. You can see Middle Eastern and North African are now part of the demographic data collected by the U.S. Census, and so that's reflected on our form. It's also delineated by gender, and so you can see all students as well as elective students, and if you have Excel students. Know that on the web form, if your school does not have Excel or does not have implementation at some grade levels, you would be able to click those, and those boxes wouldn't then require information in them. But that's page 1 is basic demographic data. And then we get to page 2 and we start to look at the breakdown in grades. So what's the breakdown in grades? What's the gender and AVID elective students? So how many students, what are we seeing from 9th grade to 12th grade or 6th to 8th grade, as well as middle school elective students? Question 17 is really about opportunity gaps and those students who are more likely to have opportunity gaps because they are economically disadvantaged, or they're part of a migrant group, or have limited English proficiency. So we want to get a sense of who those students are. Please note that in question 17, if you do not have that information, you can click U in those boxes, and then you can move forward from there. Pages 3 and 4 get into sectioning. So we look at how many sections are available to students in those first 3 questions. Question 21 gets into training, and it identifies what constitutes AVID trained. So it's asking who's been trained on campus and how does that relate to all of the teachers, counselors, and other administrators on campus. We also are curious about people that are not reflected in those categories who may have been trained, as well as what's the turnover in trained teachers? Are they staying on campus? Are they able to maintain? Because being trained once is great, but how is that impacting practice on campus? And question 24 and 25 is really about the principal, and we know that a strong AVID implementation requires a trained and engaged principal. So we want to know, has your principal taken site admin level 1 for secondary, or if it's done, a couple of years ago, maybe it was site admin new. And we know that a principal should stay in a training cycle roughly every 3 years or so. And so if it's been more than 3 years, we want to consider having that principal trained this summer. And talk to your implementation strategist about where do you think that might be the most appropriate placement, whether it's level 2 or potentially level 3 if principals haven't been trained for a while. Additionally, on pages 3 and 4, we get into how long students have been enrolled in the AVID elective. We know that the research tells us that students who take at least 3 years of the AVID elective usually have solidified those skills and can transfer them into life beyond high school. We also are looking at what types of courses students are in the AVID elective are taking. Are they taking CTE courses? Are they taking dual enrollment types of courses, or courses where they can earn college credit? And that also falls into page 4 with question 32 on are students taking PLTW courses? So conversations around courses of rigor. Page 4 and 5 then gets into the tutorial process. There's 3 questions about the different types of tutors and how tutorials are happening on campus, or scholar groups if you have AVID Excel. And we know that to be on model, tutorials need to happen 40% of the time. So twice a week on a traditional schedule, students should be engaged in the tutorial process, and that may look different depending on where students are in their learning about tutorials. We could talk certainly more about that, or your implementation strategy could talk about kind of how do we scaffold student success. But we know that engaging into the tutorial process is an important part of the AVID elective, and we want to know that students are doing that and seeing how they are doing that. Question 36 through 37 talks about the site coordinator and whether or not they receive a stipend or an additional planning period to complete that work. The next page 6 gets into the courses of rigor that students can take. So whether that's at the middle school level, courses of rigor that are available at the high school, and then the number of students who are enrolled at the high school level in courses of rigor. One of the things we know is that sometimes students struggle with tutorials, and particularly in middle school, or particularly in 9th grade, if tutorials are a struggle, one of the reasons for that is students are not enrolled in a course of rigor. And so they are not being pushed to have to think that hard, and they don't necessarily have really problems of practice to bring to or points of confusion to bring to the conversation. So we want to see where students are enrolled, and so who's taking courses of rigor on campus. Page 7 continues on the number of students who are taking these courses, AVID students versus all students in the 24-25 school year, as well as who took tests, which we wouldn't have known last year when they completed site data, that how many of them took the end of course assessment, and how did they actually do on those courses. Did they earn a C or better, or did they earn a passing score, or what have you. Questions 50 and 51 are really about kind of that return on investment, be things that I would be monitoring to be able to share our AVID story with key stakeholders. But are AVID students earning the credits that they take, and how does that relate to compared to all students on campus? When we look at questions 52, 53, and 54, we're looking at attendance rates of AVID elective students versus all students. Oftentimes we see students in the AVID elective are more likely to come to school. So that would be another key metric of impact. And the last page, page 8, is really about 24, 25 8th graders. And so it helps us understand kind of how did they similarly for those end of course assessments, did they complete successfully courses of rigor in 8th grade? Did they take a pre-collegiate exam in 8th grade, et cetera, et cetera? This is particularly helpful to sort of see how we're progressing and kind of comparing kind of where we were when we completed the data versus kind of where did the year end. Sometimes in a district that is a high school only district, a 9-12 district, which is not universal, but it does happen in some of our states, that those are two different bodies. And so sometimes these questions are a really great way to engage in that sort of collaboration with our partner districts and our partner campuses or partner schools. So it's a way to come back to the table to see kind of how did things happen, and be able to talk about how students have transitioned from 8th to 9th grade. On page 9, you have our supplemental instructions. So if there's any questions that you weren't sure why we were asking or what information we were actually requesting, you can get clarification on page 9 in those supplemental instructions. Lastly, this is our call to action. February 6th is 2 months away. So if you've not interacted with the site data form yet, you need to do that. Put some time on your calendar this week to backwards map. Figure out who on your team can help you get the information that you do not have that's easily accessible. Figure out if you need to talk to your district director or your implementation strategist. We'd be happy to help you answer some questions. Feel free to share this video with key members of your team so that you can meet that February 6th deadline. And please know that we're here to support you throughout the spring with both your data completion and your certification needs.